Psalm 119, 89 through 176. Let's finish up the conversation we had when we read the first half of Psalm 119. And that is that there's a very lively debate today, and it's really a good debate, I believe, profitable even in the very practical sense, and that is how to understand the concept of law. When we get into the New Testament, we have a very common teaching that we've heard, probably grown up with it, most of us, and that is that the law has a requirement of obedience, which brings about this understanding that we have inability really to keep it. To break one law is to break them all. We've heard that. And so the idea of failure is really, again, for the honest person built into our understanding of law. And in the end, we have this understanding then that there is a curse that is leveled upon anyone who doesn't keep the law perfectly. And important then in this view of the law, when a person accepts Christ, they need to reject the law in order to come to Christ. And Christ will be, in that sense, the end of the law. And by end, we mean basically rejection. We are saying no to the way of law and yes to the way of Christ, usually thought of in terms of grace or something like that. All right, but we also saw last time in Psalm 119 and this time that the Torah, when viewed from the left to right view, in the days of the psalmist, we have ideas like delight. Your Torah is my delight. The idea that it is kept, it is obeyed, and that the psalmist is very glad to admit that he keeps the law. He'll even say he loves the law. And so the difference there is very stark. And this is why the debate. How can someone in the New Testament describe law in these kind of negative terms, and by the time or when we go back to Psalm 119, we have such a positive view of the law? That's really the question at hand. What we also need to do is read or remember back in Psalm 19 some very strong words that go like this. The teaching or the Torah of Yahweh is perfect, renewing life. The decrees of the Lord are enduring, making the simple wise. The precepts of the Lord are just, rejoicing the heart. The instruction of the Lord is lucid, making the eyes light up. The fear of the Lord is pure, abiding forever. The judgments of the Lord are true, righteous altogether, more desirable than gold, than much fine gold, sweeter than honey, than drippings of the comb. Your servant pays them heed. In obeying them, there is much reward. All right, so why the difference? Well, let me recommend three things. One would be that we're coming again from this left side, the side of the psalmist. We're talking more than just Leviticus. We're talking the entire story, really, of Genesis through Deuteronomy. In his mind, when he says the word Torah, he is describing what the Israelite story has experienced, or what people within his family as Jews have experienced the whole time. So it's much broader than Leviticus. That's where the word law is a bit misleading in English. We tend to think of the do's and don'ts, whereas the word that is usually in Hebrew behind the word law is much broader in meaning. That's why, again, the psalmist can speak of delight. In fact, I would even recommend that the word law is just not going to work, because when we translate out Torah in the Old Testament, yes, it's going to be translated sometimes as law, but there's a text back in Genesis 26:5 where God says that Abraham kept his Torah. Well, think of the timing there, that, of course, in Genesis 26, there is no law in the sense of Mosaic stipulations in the story, and so how could Abraham keep Torah? That's because Torah doesn't mean law. Torah means the ways of someone. And yes, Abraham obeyed Yahweh. He obeyed the ways of Yahweh. So that's why, again, the psalmist is able to celebrate and have this happy attitude about Torah, because when he says that word, he's not thinking just do's and don'ts. And lastly, I think we're right back to this question of which Elohim. This is a question that I have been recommending, has been driving the story of the entire Bible so far. The emphasis on Psalm 119 is not on what to do, it's on who to follow. And so the story of following Yahweh really is the delight, then. You can see why it's the delight of the psalmist. He's answering the question, which Elohim am I worshiping? And how do I get to know him? What have I learned about him? And those kind of things excite him. And that's why he's saying, I can keep his ways. I can love his ways, and so forth. Well, of course, the biggest one of all, well, I shouldn't say biggest, but as far as part of our story yet to come, let's again think about how Jesus fits into this story here. Coming from this traditional view, we need to reject law in order to receive Christ. The way the story is going to work, and again I throw it out here now to be thought about and to be test-driven as we go, that Jesus will not need to be, when a person will believe in Jesus, he will not reject Torah. He will think of Jesus as the fulfillment of Torah. Everything that has been said here is going to fall into line with Jesus. So Jesus will be able to say, I complete Torah. I fulfill Torah. And thus there will be no rejection of the law necessary at all. We, of course, will have to talk about this in due time, but again, we can wait until that issue comes up.